What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Long Box Sessions. I'm your host, Alex Dandino.
And I'm Josh Griffey.
As always, catch us on all your socials. You know where to find us. And please go to Apple Podcasts and rate, review, and subscribe to our show. It really helps us with the metrics. We would really appreciate it. We know you like the show. You've been coming to us for years. Now, give us a little back. We would really appreciate it.
Time to pay up.
Time to pay the piper. First taste is free. I'm sure you've all been watching The Wire. You know how it goes. Don't turn into bubbles with comic books. I don't even know what that means. We hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you guys are staying at home. If you're not, well, that's your business. But nevertheless, please, hope you're staying healthy. Thank you again for tuning in. It is book club night, guys. Book club. This was by request a long time ago from one of our listeners, which I thought was very nice. We are reading Immortal Hulk by Ewing and Joe Bennett. I am really excited, actually. This is the one this is really the reason I have the Marvel Unlimited app still, because I've been reading this like this long. I love this series. We'll get into why. But Griffey, have you read? You've been buying the trades, haven't you?
Yeah, see,
this is like right
I'm always on trades, so I'm pretty much up to date on where the book is. Yeah, this is one of the few big two titles that I've been staying with consistently.
Yeah, same.
I've kind of been trudging through Tom King's Batman run, and like there are some other big two titles, but I mean, for Marvel, this might be it for me for like the last year or so, is just Immortal Hulk.
I think between this and House of X, these are the two that those are the two runs I've actually stayed intact with.
Right.
Other than that, but again, Immortal Hulk is just so easy to, it's very easy to read for being kind of like what it is.
Yeah.
We'll get into that because I want to say it's easy to read, but it's also kind of strange. For those of you who have not read it, Griff, would you mind telling, give a brief synopsis? What is the premise for Immortal Hulk?
Okay. And bear with me, because the premise that they establish is almost immediately washed away just a couple issues in. Right? So The theory of Immortal Hulk, as I take it, as the first issue lays out, right, is kind of this brilliant start in like a smash and grab at, a local convenience store. And Bruce Banner, you think he's going to Hulk out, but he gets shot and he's actually murdered. Right? Yeah. But then at night, the Hulk rises, and the corpse manifests into this bigger, more evil, more violent Hulk, right? Devil Hulk, as he's kind of referred to in the run. And Devil Hulk can smell fear. This is kind of one of the new things they dive into, is that he can sense the fear and lying and things like that. And he becomes this somewhat, I don't know if avenging angel is necessarily the proper word, but as he manifests, he seems to be hyper-targeted at those who have wronged him and the situations he's been in where crimes have occurred. So it's sort of a vampiric, zombie-like filter to add on top of just the transformation, right? So there is no Bruce Banner's angry. Bruce Banner's fucking dead. Yeah, right? And then maybe the injustice of it all, right? This kind of human cosmic anger that we feel at, these senseless murders. Maybe that's what spurs Hulk. Now, again, the plotting of the book is wild, to say the least, and I feel like they really undercut this theory of the Hulk constantly in the book, but it's still it's wildly fun all the time, and the artwork is I mean, that's what you would say, is that this Hulk book really feels like there is gamma radiation flowing off of the page. It's insanely high energy and still wildly thoughtful.
What a way to put that. I mean, I think that's the best part about the book in general, is that the art. I mean, I talk about this a lot. Like, writers are obviously important to the process, but like you come to comics for the art, and this is just some top notch, not just top notch comic book art, but top notch horror work. I got to be honest, man. Like, I feel the reverence for some of the great like horror artists. Like, I feel some Bernie Wrightson coming off the page almost. Like, it is just like this really terrifying mosaic a lot of the time. But I think that something that's really interesting to me about Immortal Hulk, and they like kind of get it, they kind of hit they touch on it at the very beginning, but like, to me, what's great is this is the kind of comic book we should be reading, is like genre work within the confines of like the big two. So if you're going to read a big two book, it's fun to read something that's like focused more on, like, I would say the horror of it all. And like what's great, and we do the other podcast, Film Alchemist, and I think the thing that I love the most about the horror movies that I've been forced to watch over the last like three years of my life is, one, all of them, save for a couple, have been really good. And it's because they are so focused on the psychological aspect, much more than the actual like scare, much more than the actual horror itself, is much more focused on the psychological terror that the premise inflicts on it. So like when you think about it, to me, Immortal Hulk is really excellent because, and granted, 2 issues in, we do kind of like dismantle the entire premise, but the relevance of the psychological trauma that Bruce Banner suffers from having been he's essentially like almost murdered every day.
Yeah.
So like focusing on that kind of psychological horror is what makes those visuals so much more intense to me. So much more, like, specifically when you get into the later, especially when you get to like the Absorbing Man more Absorbing Man issues, which I think are probably some of the more like terrifying Hulk images I've seen in a long time. Couple that with some amazing Alex Ross covers, and you're in for a treat no matter what, man. I love the covers to these books. They're incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is because you run into this problem with Hulk, right? Is that Hulk is the perfect comic book monster, right? But Hulk always has this problem. It's if you make him a really classic hero, right, and he's too friendly. Like my kids watch some Marvel shows where he's just like the big funny guy, right? He's like a giant Michelangelo. Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's great. That's what he does. But he's not the same Hulk as, and then if you make him too monstrous, like in something like when they did the Ultimates run, right? And he's literally eating alien Nazis. Like he thinks he doesn't know they're aliens when he starts eating them. He's just like, oh, Hulk's just like swallowing people and chewing them up in his teeth. Or he's losing his shit and destroying parts of Manhattan, and as a reader, you have to confront the fact, oh, shit, human beings are being actually murdered. In a sense,
right?
It's kind of one of those uneasy things in comics. Is every time we see buildings falling, you're like, yeah, there could be people in there. Right. And so Hulk always walks this very thin line of he's so wildly popular that we want to root for him and for him to be heroic. But the very nature of what makes Hulk is an uncontrolled outburst of emotions. And then the time we spend with Bruce Banner is him regretting that he cannot maintain control, right? So there's a lot of that we can relate to, the losing your cool and temper and doing things you don't want, not on the scale of him, obviously. So now what you do is you take some genre and you find a way to shift that lens just a hair, right? Because it reminds me that, Stephen King, I think, is the one who said that there are the 3 horror stories, right? There's Frankenstein, Dracula, and Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Right. And Hulk is a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We are afraid of what's in us. And so instead of just, the sad Bill Bixby version where he's like walking down hitchhiking like, another misadventure and another pair of ripped clothes. And don't get me wrong, the Bixby Hulk fucking slaps. But, yeah, it's so funny. My mom used to go to the gym and they didn't have like kids care back then. So they would put us on a couch by the front desk. And the guy would just turn on the Hulk and or Wings, depending on the day. And that's what was supposed to keep us from being savages. Long story short, Mom got kicked out of the gym. But so I've seen all the Bixby Hulks, and I love them. But what this one does is they shifted a hair, right? Where this book kind of is pulling Hulk a little bit away from Banner at the start. Whereas the Hulk is, again, making him something that is triggered by death.
Yeah.
Very much changes because now you're not having this eruption. It's not a crime of passion anymore. It becomes this supernatural punishment.
Right. I'd say the interesting thing is the shift in lens to it being really more about Hulk than it is about Bruce's journey itself. Like Bruce's journey ended in Secret Wars 2 when he got shot with the arrow. Because that's really where that's the impetus of this whole story is that Bruce Banner dies in Civil War 2. And that's what allowed the Immortal Hulk storyline to begin, which is, again, it's a fascinating thing to see a character that is, like you were saying, a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, almost kind of start to become like two versions of horror film. Like you think about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then also a little bit of Frankenstein, and now even a little bit of Dracula with this whole thing where he lives by night. Like,
yeah,
it's a
because
fascinating...
that's what the book starts, right? Is that night is his time. So if Banner dies,
right.
if it's night, that's when Hulk will come
right.
out.
Which is interesting because, like, how many times have we said, like, well, it's makes everything inconsequential when characters die and then they come back to life. Like, we all know, like, this is literally that premise. Every single issue is like, well, he could just die, but it doesn't really matter because he'll come right back.
Right, because what happens is if a character dies and comes back the same, that's when it sucks, right? Like, even someone like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, he came back, he's like, well, what's up? I'm washed, bitches, so now I took
a bath. Sorry, guys.
And my horse is dope as hell again. You know, and you're like, well, that's, goddamn, the Balrog is way cooler, right? But there are stories where coming back from death to accomplish a mission, right? Something like The Crow pops to mind, right? That story only works because this is a man who's killed prematurely, and he got business, right? And as he comes back, and as he handling business, his emotional struggle of, why am I even, destroying these guys? What am I fighting for? I'm here now fighting is this for vengeance of something that no longer exists, right? I have no stake in this world. And it's just burning hatred. And that is very much where the Hulk can live in this. And again, it's strange, too, because let's say you kill someone at sunup, right? You could be across the country. But Hulk can fucking sense you and will find you, right? There's a weird part in the book where Bruce even says that the Hulk is smarter than him, but it's all hunches and magical thinking.
Yeah, that's
so he
I love
more
that part.
Of a serial killer, yeah.
That's actually one of my favorite parts of the book where he's like, so that's new.
Yeah, right? Well, no, when he says that's new is when Hulk is trying to pound out of the mirror.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
But that's what I love about this version of the Hulk, and it feels so much more, it feels much fresher than I think we've seen from like other takes in recent years, simply because like when you take away the essence of what like the premise is, like the Hulk no longer is activated by stress. Mm-hmm. It's no longer activated by Bruce Banner. Like now, if Bruce Banner gets through the day, gets through the day without dying, that's a different story. Like he still comes out at night, but he does have a little
being
more
murdered
control,
is stressful. It's pre-stress.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you think of like, I think issue 2 when he meets like that gamma irradiated dude, like Bruce is still alive when he enters the cave, and then literally like he starts getting choked out by this gamma irradiated guy, which is what activates Devil Hulk. But again, when you erase, like when you wipe the slate clean of what creates the Hulk, like when the conditions no longer matter, I actually think it provides us with an opportunity we haven't had in a long time with the Hulk, which is you don't know what's going to happen. And that's something that I think is interesting because, like we said, 2 issues into this book, like the premise of like, oh, he's like the avenging angel, which kind of makes him the greatest Avenger when you think about it. But like, he's like this kind of avenging angel, but really it's not. And then it becomes this sort of weird psychological warfare between him and the other Hulks, as well as the other people who are chasing Bruce Banner the entire time, which is a whole nother B plot. But ultimately, I think what I love about that is that it does make me keep reading for some reason. Like normally in other stories, I feel like I would have put it away already and been like, I don't want to read something that just restarts itself every like 2 issues. But it absolutely works. Like it absolutely makes me think like, okay, now I want to read, simply because it's not necessarily restarting, but while we're doing sort of this like greatest hits of Hulk's villains, which, are Hulk's villains, granted it's no Gamma Poodle, but at the same time, like when we're going through this greatest hits of villains, that can get really repetitive. And that's where I think stuff like the Green Door and his version of Hell come into play, which I think is actually kind of interesting.
Yeah. What it is that I find fascinating about this, right, is there is a moment in the book and I believe this might be in the Hulk Goes to Hell book, right? In volume 3.
Right. Yeah.
When Bruce is talking about his initial pursuit of the gamma bomb, right? And, kind of getting caught out in the testing range and hinting that maybe it was his hubris that let him stay out there too long. But there's a really cool line in there they slipped in that I've never heard in context of Hulk before, which is, as he started to break the science of gamma radiation, he said he saw something and it was searching him out. Right?
Yeah,
so that his quest of science and gamma radiation, whether as an entity itself, right? Because Hulk has always functioned essentially as a magical being, right? He is a magical being that we just say is the consequence of science, but really he is a classic fantasy character to me.
Yeah, totally.
And especially horror in this one too, like a horror fantasy. But what you say is, all right, so take that, right? That here's this scientist who thinks he's doing this, and then is, struck down by... He kind of walks science to the limit to where it can no longer be understood, and it becomes magic.
Right.
Hence why all the other gamma-irradiated freaks, which is kind of, to me, the sin of the Hulk character, right? Is that all they've ever done is, how can we get gamma into other things to have punchy times? Right. And you're like, that's fine. Like, it's fine to do other gamma irradiated things if they had done it more interestingly, right? In this book provides why are they also inferior to the Hulk? What is the X factor? And now you're saying is that Hulk is not some, random consequence, but that Banner, through his own personal sins, right, and his character flaws, he is actually the green door to the other side, right? That he is what drew Hulk to himself, and that's what makes him. And that to me is what's really fun. Is you're adding this perspective shift to more examine what Hulk is, right? He's not just this is going to ruin my day, right?
Yeah,
like he becomes his own mythology.
I think the thing that I like the most is simply because it's not about, it's the first time I've really read Hulk as it's less reactive.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing I like the most is like the way that Al Ewing decides to write him is so much less reactive and so much more plotting. And I think that's something we don't normally get from Hulk books. Like Hulk is very often like much more of a just a, you smash the bad guy and you walk away. Like that's the day. I really like that a lot of this is it's a road story. It's a lot of psychological trauma, a lot of addressing psychological trauma, but then like you were saying, addressing essentially the eventuality of who you really are. Like the monster within, was it always there? And like that's the thing that the Green Door addresses, because you get through and you see this sort of weird psychological representation of his father, who clearly was a total piece of shit, but also isn't really his father, but much more like this psychological representation of all the things Bruce Banner ever wanted to be mixed into one person. Like, to be out there, to be a force to be reckoned with. That's something Bruce Banner always wanted, and it wasn't. That's what the Hulk is for him. So the Hulk being, and particularly Double Hulk, or Immortal Hulk, I guess, as it would be in the book, for him to be essentially a walking id for Bruce Banner is what makes this book so compelling. It's probably the thing I enjoy the most, like particularly issue 8, which kind of functions as a bottle episode of like a TV show, no pun intended, when they literally vivisect Bruce Banner and place his organs and everything in jars.
Yeah, not Bruce, though. The actual gigantic Hulk with adamantium cutting tools.
Yeah, they use adamantium.
Splash, it's probably the best splash they've done is when they cut to the guy's office and it's just gigantic jars.
There's just huge jars
of all the different pieces of Hulk, but like he can still give him the finger, he can still smile, his heart's still beating.
And more importantly, he can also still snap, which, and again, when you're the Hulk, these things like that might have been one of my all-time favorite like panels in a book. And probably one of the greater splash pages I've ever seen is all the pieces of the Immortal Hulk converging and literally swallowing this guy whole.
Well, what that moment is so brilliant in is that it's one of the first times that instead of just being Godzilla and walking around smashing. This was all a plot by him. It's plotted, yeah.
He wanted to get into the base.
The doctor has that moment. He's like, I'll fucking cut your nuts off. I'll cut your eye out. He's trying to do like tough guy talk. Like, I'm gonna dissect you, Hulk. And Hulk's just smiling and laughing. He's like, what the fuck are you smiling at? And then he realized, like, oh my God, you wanted to test your limits too. Like, he was using him. And when Hulk snaps and absorbs him, this is one of the first really premeditated, subtle kills that we've ever seen from Hulk. Right? And he's just kind of like, bitch, please. Like, you weren't going to get me. And it's so funny because, again, it just plays the classic horror moment, right? It's Hulk gets out of the jar and his cells smash, as it were. They smash him into, digestible whatever. But that's what this book constantly does, is it just moves the launch point just enough to where you're like, oh, fuck, I've never seen that before. Like, that feels fresh and different. And Hulk has always been one of those. I had people that ask me about these characters a lot because of, the nature of what we do. And I hear this a lot about Superman is boring, Thor is boring, right? Those are like, they're like, oh, we kind of know and they're good guys, whatever.
Right.
Captain America's boring, but a lot of people tell me Hulk is also boring. They're like, yeah, I'll pick it up to just see like cool art of him ripped. Like you're looking at like a muscle fitness, right? Like Hulk in a muscle pose. But no one really wants to read the stories because, again, it's like, are you really that excited about the Wendigo or Absorbing Man? And I know there are comic book people out there that, I'll prove my cred by saying, yes, I am rock hard when I see the Wendigo. It's like, yeah, sure, man. All right, good for you. Good for you, brother. But, like, is there a lot of narrative depth to watching Hulk and Wendigo just slug it out for the fucking 800th time, it feels like?
Right.
And Hulk becomes this hard character to write because of some of that. And sometimes, we find ourselves just really falling in love with something that is so wildly bad and campy just because it's different, right? Like when he goes to Vegas and becomes a mob enforcer. You're like, it just felt different. You're like, well, I'll fucking do this. I don't give a fuck. World War Hulk, right? Planet Hulk, because you're like, oh, shit, this is different. This feels right. And so that's what is cool is when you can take it. And this book doesn't do something like we have to put him on a gladiator planet, right? This is the same Hulk we've always known, but just move the launch point a little bit on the classic scenes we've come to expect. And it has an enormous effect, man. Like that little tiny shift. And you feel like you're getting something fresh and new. While it is, I would argue this book is pretty standard Hulk stuff.
Yeah,
but on like a basic like what is if you just break the plot down to like it's very simple lines, but it doesn't feel like normal Hulk ever.
Well, it feels much bigger than that, and I think it's because so often when we're reading this book, particularly, I feel like we're reading something that is constantly shifting focus, like you were saying, and I think that's a big deal, and that's a big part of why this book is successful and why this book is interesting is because Al Ewing does something really unique here, which is simply, again, it's like it's a moving target every time. The minute you think you've got this thing pinned down, like a great example is I don't know what trade it's in, but the issue where Absorbing Man goes after him finally, and that to me is a great example of like, okay, now we're just settling into. Wait a second. Literally, Hulk is deflating as we see as we like. He's deflating, and like Absorbing Man is literally splitting in two. Like it's uncanny. It's bizarre. It's crazy imagery.
So his spinal column can say sorry.
Yeah.
Well, like another part of him is lost in a different. Yeah, you're like, oh, okay. This is much better than just swinging a ball and chain around.
Right, and like that's I think the crazy thing is like the whole time we're sitting there going like, this is gonna happen. Like it's a foregone conclusion that this is gonna be a whoa. Hang on, what? Like that's what Al Ewing and Joe Bennett are constantly doing with this book. Is they're constantly taking you all the way to the edge of what you think you know, and then moving the needle back like just a hair, just enough for you to trip. So that you're looking over the edge and you see into the abyss of what they're really trying to get at. Which, again, if I'm being totally honest, I'm either not smart enough to know or it's a little muddy at times and I'm not totally sure exactly what they're trying to accomplish overall.
It's and it maybe in their mind it's not muddy. Because I would say what this book's really trying to do, right? There's a whole, like, the entire volume where they're in hell. It starts with, what is God? What is the devil? What is the Hulk, right? And so they are just taking time to ponder these big questions, right? You know, because in a man, right, there are angels and demons, right? And that would play for the Hulk, too. They have that great line, like, does God have a Hulk? You know?
Right.
Because it's kind of one of the dumbest things in Christian mythology is that they're like, oh, the devil's a worthy adversary for God. You're like, no, he's not. Like, he tried to fight for the throne. He got his ass banished. He could never beat the all-powerful God. God gave him enough rope to hang himself. And now he sits down there in eternal loserdom. He's essentially the Cleveland Cavaliers of heaven, right? Like, without LeBron, right? You just sit there and be a little fucking punk bitch. Right. And so it's just one of those funny things that people became so afraid of the devil without realizing all of the evil that's in our world has to come from the all-powerful source, right? Like, all of that is God's evil. God is the one giving those kids cancer, not the devil that he fucking banished to this icy, fiery nether realm, right? And so this book has that. That's a really fun place to put Devil Hulk, right? Does God have that I lose my shit and am fed up with it, right? And God wants to punish like the Hulk does. So I think the book takes a lot of time to sit and just, and I know it's not always everyone's favorite thing in comic books, right? To just sit and, you know, do these big pondering kind of ideas. And I would be lying if I said that, you know, as I get to Doc Samson's, well, it was hard being me. You're like, I don't need that entire book, right? Like, I don't need Doc Samson giving me his trauma or Sasquatch giving me his trauma. Like, but in a way, it also is helpful, right? Because you see all of these guys are so Banner-like in their pursuits, right? They all think their quest is true, but in different ways. Why then is Banner the one? Why did he become the Hulk, right? Samson was a much better athletic, smarter starting point, right? Maybe not smarter, but, you know, comparable. He just became like a green-haired guy. And why did Sasquatch just become this big furry monster and shit? You know, like, what are these differences? Right. And I think that's the fun, is that they really stop and just ponder, right? Like, because I would argue the weakest point of this series is the plotting, right? Because it's like something happens, we fight, random guy who tells us his sad life story, and they always end on like a wildly awesome final page and like a cliffhanger line, right? Right. And you're like, all right, it's a good formula. It works really well. But, you know, the plotting to get to like, I'm going to fight Sasquatch because he also is sad he's not me. Like, all right, that's cool. But then in the wreckage that fight creates, right? This is where they ascend above a lot of Hulk books to me. Is in the wreckage, he's confronted by the reporter. And, you know, he's like, why? Why are you pursuing this? And I can smell if you're lying. And, you know, she starts talking about, well, you fucking destroyed my house. And, like, I was one of the victims of, like, the Hulk's rage. And he kind of looks at her, you know, and, you know, he's taking this in. And her actual question to him, though, is not, do you feel bad? Like, you know, why did you do it to me? She says, how can I become what you are? Right. And so she is another Samson and Lankowski and, you know, all these guys. And I think that's the fun part of this book, is the Hulk is always played as a burden in a lot of his stories, but we, the fans, fantasize about being the Hulk, man. Well, and so I think this is just playing with that. Everyone wants to be that guy, despite having seen how horrifically wrong it can go.
Right. I think that's the best part about what they're doing with this, is simply saying, like, focusing on the Hulk being this, like, burden is so tired and so, like, a tried and true formula. Like, we've already done this, you know? Like, I absolutely love that really this isn't about the burden of the Hulk. This is about, like you were saying, the burden of the Hulk on everyone else. Not necessarily the Hulk himself, but the power of the Hulk. Like, but the gamma power. I don't even
think it's burden, though. That's what I think is very interesting. And I think that's why the things like Doc Samson and this and that I'm like, I don't need to, like, relitigate everyone he's come in contact with, right? Right. But what it is they see how fucking horribly this has gone for Bruce, and they see the devastation the Hulk's caused in his many deaths, and he's this outcasted monster. But every single one of them, in the face of uncheckable power, right? That there's that line, where Thor, with his fucking head cracked open, who's like, he's getting stronger. Thor's the one, I think, who said, the mortals may have finally created their own god, or perhaps it's a devil. Right? Like, we've been around long enough, and finally one of us has broken this shackling. And even Captain America has his limits. Iron Man has his limits. Right? Like, if Iron Man doesn't have double A's, shit doesn't work anymore, right? Like, he's done. Like, he's like, my extension cord. Right? That might be far-fetched, right? Maybe in, like, the old suburban Iron Man, for sure. But
it's definitely suburban Iron Man.
Yeah, right? But this is the thing, right? They all have their limits. The Hulk played as the most horrific monster, a total burden. This curse, this ruining this man's life, almost as if he's like a drug addiction eating him from the inside, a cancer. However you want to phrase it. All the people that come into contact with it are completely in love with the idea of taking that into themselves. And that is a stunning and scary thing that most of those books don't play at, right? And a really interesting level. They might do something like, one guy wants to punch harder than the Hulk, so he'll do it, boom.
Right.
Well, they don't explain that. They don't take you the time to show how this person came to that beyond wanting to just be a strong puncher.
Right. Well, and I think that's where you get a character like General Fordian, who's like actually like you think about, like, I think about Doc Samson and like Betty in this book, who are like, Betty's weird. I don't understand the Hulk bird lady thing. That's weird, but whatever.
Even she wants to. I mean, technically, she gets murdered though, like straight up murdered.
She like has like some awesome power, but General Fordian's this great example of someone who misunderstands the want for that power. Like, I feel like Doc Samson's very logical about it in some way. Like, it's very Doc Samson-y, You
can only have so many creatine shakes, and he's like, I gotta step it up a notch.
Yeah. You can only drink so many celery juices before your body's completely cleansed, and you can just, there's only so much muscle milk in the world. But General Fordian's the one who like experiments with that power beyond its limits. Like, not only that, but like does what I think Bruce Banner would have done in his stead. Like, Bruce Banner to me is someone who, before the accident of the Hulk, was arrogant enough to think he could control not science, but the very nature of chaos. And I think General Fordian is in that same boat of being someone who thinks they can guide chaos well enough, which is why he creates this the true abomination with Rick Jones's face in it, which is pretty horrifying when you finally get the reveal. But then he decides to take on this chaos himself. And he's like, I am the commander of chaos myself. Like, that is like probably one of my all-time favorite mashups.
But that's why this is so
this abomination with like hands. Oh, like, God. I love that.
It's so repulsive. The artwork is just stunning. But yeah,
it's awesome.
But that's what makes it fascinating. Is imagine seeing Dracula or Frankenstein's monster or the Wolfman and saying, "Fuck, get over here." Like, you're fucking.
Right,
you're putting the Worcestershire on your neck. Like, come over here, buddy. I'm ready. Take a little nibble. You want a taste? Come on, have a taste and give me some power. And like, imagine seeing like this fucking these horrible monsters, as we've called them, and giving them your neck because you want to be them, right? And that it's one of those. It's just right there on the surface, right? And they weaponize it in a way that to me is fascinating because, again, a lot, if not 95+% of the people that Hulk's dealt with are just people that were chasing, Hulk, right?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of like there is like this weird
it's like the Eminem Machine Gun Kelly thing, right? Like, they're just lesser, more horrible versions of the original, and then he fights them, and they learn that.
Yeah,
but we never
it is this weird like heroin level of obsession.
We never stop to ponder, is that real? Like, do people really look at the Hulk and be like, yeah, that life seems kick-ass, having baggy clothes and, being a hobo and eating cheese sandwiches at diners because you just, bum 75 cents to call Betty on the payphone for her to call you a fuck. You're like, is that the life you want? But there is an absolute beauty in the lack of fear and restraint that the Hulk has that would be an unbelievable opportunity that most of us could not resist.
Totally.
And that's why, and then they pair that with the Green Door, and it, again, I don't know that, I think the point of view of what they're trying to say about the Hulk is wildly different from issue to issue. Because, again, it's not this avenging angel curse, right? That, it becomes
that
now
goes
he's
away
like
so
the
quickly.
Buddy Hulk. Yeah, it's very strange how they shift that around, but it never loses the bigger purpose of the book, which is giving us these really great, tools to access our own relationship with, this monstrous character.
Right. I mean, that's really kind of ultimately what the book, it's interesting because it does seem like you would imagine the way it starts, it's going to be very by the numbers. And I think the shifting perspective and the constant question of from after the Green Door to really get into what is God and that kind of thing. Really the question that's being asked throughout the entirety of the run so far is just what is true power? That's something that we ask a lot of the time with X-Men, because Xavier is obviously one of the most, Xavier, Magneto, they're most powerful telepath, most powerful, I don't know what you would call
Omega
Magneto.
level mutant.
Yeah, Omega level mutants. That's something that they address in House of X a lot. But really the Hulk is the most terrifying. It's really the most interesting because there is we've never really seen the upper echelons of the power that the Hulk has. So to me, the Immortal Hulk run itself is about addressing what is power. What is real power here? And who can actually wield it besides not Bruce Banner himself, but besides the manifestation of power itself, which is the Immortal Hulk. The Immortal Hulk is so powerful that it literally came back from the dead. That's the power.
He was
that's
too
the true
strong
power.
For death to claim.
It's too strong for death.
Yeah, death
that's
can't
amazing.
claim him, right? But that's,
right, exactly.
And also that death being the trigger and him inevitably coming back shows this inevitable residing nature of the Banner Hulk relationship.
Right.
And it's, that is the funny thing is when you stop the we're going to bicker against each other or we're going to meld into one. What if we're just two dudes that work together? Yeah. Or we're going to kick ass at work. And it's
and that's the best part about
they start with the Devil Hulk premise and that nighttime is his time and they're very separate beings. But the weird wrench they throw in this story, and I think probably what undercuts a lot of what they're trying to do with the horror elements, or maybe not. Maybe the whole point is just for us to ponder this relationship. So why not give us things that don't necessarily match up evenly, right? That's life. We're all a hodgepodge. But they do this thing where Hulk is the older brother, right? Where the reason he comes back from the dead is because someone picks on Banner. And as he says 10 times, I think, in the first 20 issues is, I take that personal.
Yeah.
And then, then we start getting into once we get to Hell, the emotional bonds between them are really different in this book to me, which is the Hulk is not some misbegotten random molecules and radiation bouncing together. He is this actual deeper manifestation of a need that Bruce has. Because one of the stunning scenes is when, Quiggoth or whoever takes the shape of the dad and is destroying Bruce. The green Pandora's box or whatever the fuck we're doing at that point.
Right.
You see this flashback into the dad because, he has that great line, too, at one point. I think it's when he's in Sasquatch and he's like, I should have fucking killed you in your crib. I knew you were a monster. Later from the guy we see smashing his wife's face into the fucking ground, right? So that guy's judging you and saying he should baby murder you. But what we see is there's this really cool scene, and it was so poignant, is when the dad's just fucking ripping him a new one, right? Yeah. And he calls him a monster when he's but a little boy. And you see little Bruce, and he just is all teared up, and then he goes smash, and he fucking crushes Lego buildings. And they're telling you right there that these things are what gave birth to this Hulk, right? Not the fucking bomb as everyone suspects, and that's why none of the other Gamma shit works.
No,
because this started. That was the beacon that called through the green door.
Yeah, the bomb is the bullet being released from the chamber.
Yeah,
these are the bullets getting locked in.
Yeah,
I think is,
and so that's why I think it's because again it really struck me as an odd turn when he became like really cool big. I'm like, so wait, this is Immortal or Onward Hulk? Is that what we're doing? We're doing Onward Hulk now. Like the really nice, like guiding brother. All right, but it's really, it still works really well in what they're doing, right? Because again, the whole book is telling us to lose your preconceived notions of the Hulk Banner relationship and reassess, man, change your lens.
Yeah,
and so that moment is just stunning to us when he's standing with Banner, right? And he's like, "Hey, I think I can get us through the door, but we have to go through together. If not, we won't make it." Right, so Immortal Hulk is telling us he'll die without Banner, right? Some of his powers derive from Banner because of this journey. And, Banner kind of gives him the, what? And he's like, it's because I love you. And he said someone had to. And that, to me, is a really cool perspective for where this Hulk came from. Is here was just this fucking, emotionally fucking abused and scarred kid. And he created the friend and being he needed.
Yeah. Well, that's really kind of like it's interesting. Like,
and they take the hands, they hold the hands, and that, because I think it's a 9-panel, which I know you were rock hard about when you see 9+ panels on a page.
Fuck you.
I know your pages are probably stuck together now. You'll never be able to experience that page again. But that's
why I read them digitally, man.
9. Oh, so you can go and squeeze your eye. Oh, 9 panels. But yeah, so that was just a really cool payoff. Again, and that's what I mean, is a lot of this is kind of swirling madness that you're like, what? Why? Where? What? But emotionally, it's always spot on, and I'm always enjoying the thought process.
I think the thing that I like the most about this book is about this series in general is that it does such a good job of not just making Devil Hulk, like you were saying, like it does a good job of not making Devil Hulk just, he's just like bad guy Hulk. Yeah. He's mean Hulk. Because one, all of them are sort of bad. Like Joe Fixit shows up as like in Bruce Banner's body.
And also in the first issue, he doesn't kill all of the bikers.
Yeah.
And the guy who killed a 12-year-old girl, as he said.
Right.
But I mean, I guess you could make the argument that, like, Batman sometimes just scaring the fuck out of them and maiming them is worse than death.
Sure. But that's not ever been the issue with Hulk. The Hulk is terrifying in and of himself.
Yeah, that's true. Like, well, there's that weird line, too, later where Samson talks about the moment he thought he died. And he said, what is it? Death is a simple, perfect moment. You know what I mean? And so, by not granting death, maybe that's it. But I'm with you on that.
I mean, I think is something you touched on something though that I really like about what this Hulk does, which is, and this is Al Ewing. To Al Ewing's credit, he's such a great writer. Like, it takes a lot to, like, the thin line between love and hate. There's really not a lot of difference between the two emotions. There's one very fundamental difference, and that's what makes things. But other than that, they run pretty close together, and I think that's what's the most important thing is Al Ewing has finally sort of unlocked this version of the Hulk that is oddly about love more than anything. And I think that's probably the scariest part of all. In the form of like
zombie vampire Lord Hulk, right?
Yeah, man.
Could it
be more? I mean, could it be more Dracula-esque? I mean, it's eternal love now, man.
Well, it's a man learning to love himself, right?
Right.
Yeah, it is strange. That's a really good way to phrase it because that's not how I would have thought of it. But yeah, this is the most loving Hulk story.
It is.
Right? It's so weird. Now that you say that out loud, I'm like, oh fuck, yeah, that makes sense. And that's not how I'm assuming I'm assuming that wasn't in their initial pitch. You know?
Yeah. No, I'm assuming Al Ewing did not know he was going to go.
Did it start with that 70s song? Love story? The fireworks. Psh, psh, psh.
I'm sure he did not go in thinking he was going to pitch love, live.
He goes to Marvel. Like, love is blind, but with Hulk that can't die. Here's a pen. Sign my check.
Sign my check for $100. That's
Write zero so you have carpo tunnel. This is the one. But yeah, I think that's the cool thing about the book, because honestly, as much as I even love horror, right? If all we're doing is revenge werewolf Hulk,
yeah,
I mean, that shit will play out really fast. Even with a great crew of writers, colorers, letterers, like the whole gang here is killing it, right?
Absolutely.
This is a great product. It's one of those things where you're just like, this is the peak of comics, right? Where you open the book and everything is so on point. And it just feels amazing when you're reading a book like that, right? But even all that shit would play out, right? When it's like, oh, Bruce got shanked for the fucking 9th time in a row, and now Hulk's going to go beat up, random humans.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's when I think it gets to, like, episodic, like, bad Bixby Hulk. Because the Bixby Hulk we all want is the one on the side of the road. Da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da. Like, that's the thing we want, is the man who has to live with the monster.
Well, what is great about Bixby Hulk is that he helped pull Banner forward.
Right, exactly.
And that's the thing. And probably one of the least Bruce Banner-y guys. He's kind of just this. He's a little butch. But what he did is with Bixby, we spent so much time with the human form of him and watching his empathy and suffering that it made us think of the Hulk as not just, oh, cool, the big green punchy guy. We're like, oh, fuck, there's like a whole nother dude whose life is over now. And that's what Bixby gave us. And in a weird way, the best Hulk stories have always followed that tradition.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's the that's really like what it is. Is it is like this sort of, it's the same great emotional beat from a Bixby Hulk, which is you're like, oh man, a man trapped alone, living with the monster inside him. Like that's the life of Bruce Banner. What's great about Immortal Hulk is what this is really the monster trapped inside that gets to come out at night. Like, that's the best part.
Well, imagine the Bixby episode that starts with him seeing a 12-year-old girl murdered.
Right.
Right? Like, I mean, he's not just going to be like, well, I better hitchhike up out of here. You know what I mean?
He's gonna, groundbreaking, but nevertheless.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's exactly what it is. Like, it has the same emotional gut punch that all these great comics should, particularly though. And again, like, the great Hulk books we think about are about the Hulk himself. Like, I think about like Planet Hulk, World War Hulk. Those are the two like most recent ones that I think are the most popular for sure, but definitely the most prevalent because they are about the Hulk addressing this internal struggle he constantly has, not just as Bruce Banner, but as the Hulk himself.
Right, and this book follows along the lines of those books where this one stops, and instead of just being a reaction, Banner gets mad, so Hulk comes out, and there's shit in front of him, so he just handles it, because that's what Hulk does. The time period between death and his arrival speaks to something else. In this book, one of the really cool things, I know they do it at least twice, I can remember, which is when he confronts the drug dealer, murderer in the first... Well, they're like bikers. I don't know what the fuck they actually do, what their crimes are. But he confronts that house, right? He's mangling these dudes, and he comes out, and there's just these great... Again, man, I know you were just fapping wildly as you saw all these 9 panels and shit.
I hate you.
So, it's him explaining to Hulk why it happened. In saying, haven't you ever made a mistake? And Hulk fucking smiles and goes after him, right? Which tells us again, Banner did not mistakenly create and find the Hulk. And then later, the guy who murdered his son experimenting with Gamma and is now the irradiated skeleton. He does the same thing where he's kind of weeping openly about what he did to his son. And he keeps calling it a mistake, right? People keep pleading with Hulk saying, haven't you ever made a mistake? We know for a fact the Hulk has made a lot of mistakes. But that doesn't matter. He's still here because now you've done something that Hulk can't abide. Like, Hulk is now Hulk angry. Not Banner gets angry. Hulk gets angry.
It's Hulk angry.
Yeah, that's a really cool... that's a really cool thing they were doing a little bit at the start, is having people explain to Hulk, this is my mistake, while kind of re-solidifying that notion that, Banner was mystically chosen, right? I think it was cool, man. I like that part of the book a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that sets it apart from really any other Hulk book that I've read. And really, to be honest with you, any of the big 2 books I've read, is it reads just so much more personal than I think I'm used to from these kinds of things. And is what makes it so fascinating is, again, it's not about the Hulk. It's not about Bruce Banner running from the law. It's about Bruce and all the other Hulks inside him confronting what it is that they really are. Like, what is the true nature of what they are, and how do you contend with that? It's
once just you see a story where it's like even the Avengers are like, fuck, right? And they're like, we can't even kill him. Once you know you can't die, right? It is the curse of longevity, is that as you see everything you love die, right? And that's kind of very much the Bruce Banner story, is watching everything he thought meant the world to him be lost or destroyed or altered or corrupted, like we've seen Betty, right? Right. All you would have is time to ponder, man. You know?
Yeah.
And we don't get the sense that Hulk sleeps. He's trapped inside, because whenever Banner looks in a mirror, he sees the Hulk. So the Hulk is just pondering all this shit, man. And that again plays into the great, vampiric nature of it, right? And that, again, I think by the time you get to like issue 20-ish, we're starting to slide back into what feels like more standard Hulk stuff. It's still cool and wild, but I feel like they're drifting back to the means, right? But I think because they started in such a wildly awesome place, I think I've said wildly 20 times. If that was your drinking game word, you did. But because they started in such a unique and fascinating place, their drift to the means still makes them better than most things I'm reading.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still locked in. I think that's probably the best part. That's the best thing I can say, is that even if it does become sort of standard Hulk fare as it goes on, Al Ewing, Joe Bennett, and the whole crowd just made an all-timer with Immortal Hulk.
Absolute all-timer.
I hope that anyone listening, if you haven't read this, I'm sorry for spoiling some stuff for you, but also, I didn't really. Go read this.
Also, I don't feel bad for spoiling things on an episode called Immortal Hulk. What did you think we were going to talk about?
Yeah, honestly, if you haven't read it, go and read it right now. It's so good. It's so terrifyingly awesome. It has like some of the best horror visuals of any of the big 2. Like, this harkens back. It wasn't even this good when they were allowed to write horror comics. So I mean, like, again, I'm my mind's blown, man. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I'm also glad
visceral action. It's visceral, horror scenes, but also big questions, big pondering questions. So it's one of the rare
fun to read books with these big
or
ideas.
horror books where you put it down and you're like, oh, I've still got a lot on my mind. Like, I've got stuff I'm going to be working out for a while, right? Normally Hulk, it's just like, oh, that was dope. I love Smash. And now you're getting a lot of extra shit too. It's the best of both worlds. That's it,
guys. Immortal Hulk is available on Marvel Unlimited. Griffey, you have up through trade 5, right?
Yeah, I only have 4 on my desk, but boom, baby. And these are fucking beautiful. They got all the extra art.
These Alex Ross covers are amazing. They're collector's items for sure, guys. Please read this story. Please read this story in general. Yeah, look at that first cover.
Look at that guy. Woo!
That's just so good.
That is fucking
If you're watching us on YouTube, at least. If you're listening to the pod, go watch on YouTube, too. Having said that, as always, you can catch us all on our social media. Please go to Apple Podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. We're also on YouTube. See, if you're seeing us right now, I'm smiling. You find us on Nerd Alchemists. That's plural with an S. Hope you guys read along with us. Of course, we'll be back next week with some more regular scheduled programming. Stay safe out there, guys. From the Long Box Sessions, I'm Alex Dandino.
And I'm Josh Griffey. And check this shit out. Oh, my God, dude. I'm as rock hard as when Alex sees 9+ panels. I'm going to do that joke forever.
Griffey's rock hard with a 2-page splash, that's for sure.
You bring the pages, I'll bring the splash.